Well, good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. It'll take a little getting used to with the 360, so I'll just be kind of rotating as we go. There were some travel issues getting here today, so I got off a plane this morning. It was my second try at the airport, and I've slept a total of 0 minutes. I've never given a talk before on 0 minutes of sleep. So I think one of two things will happen. Either it will go a lot better than usual or a lot worse than usual. So it could become my regular thing that I do before every talk, but we'll wait until the end to see how that goes. But I'm very excited to be here today. When I got invited to come to this event, my wife almost had a heart attack. She's like, "What are you doing speaking at a fashion week event?" Which I kind of take offense to. But then I remembered that it must be because in 2014, Uniqlo was looking for some non-models and put me in a campaign. So that must be why I'm here. And then I kind of ruled that one out and thought, well, it could be the beard that I grew for the first time and shaved 2 days ago. Like maybe people spotted me and thought it was really trendy. But I think that more rationally, the reason I'm probably here is that I'm a software entrepreneur that spent the last 8.5 years building a fitness software company and got acquired by a big fitness brand in March, ASICS Corporation. So, unfortunately, I think that's why I'm here. But what I'm really excited to be here for another reason as well, I should say, is that so the Runkeeper user community, and I don't know how many of you know Runkeeper or have used Runkeeper, but it's very global, and it was kind of by accident. It started just like in Boston, where I was born and raised, and we built this little app, and it was global out of the gates just because in the App Store there was a switch that you flipped that said, like, do you want it to be available in every App Store? But we have millions of users now all over the world in almost 200 countries and territories, and Sweden is our number 2 country. And Stockholm is our number 1 city out of any city globally. And that is amazing, not so much for us, but for you guys, because I mean, you guys punch way above your weight class in terms of fitness. So, and in 8.5 years, I've never been to Sweden, and so whether or not Runkeeper is important to you guys, Sweden and Stockholm are very important to Runkeeper. So I have a lot of time today. I hope not to use all of it, but we'll see how it goes. But I thought I'd talk to you about a few things. So I think the frame for the talk was how fitness brands are morphing from top-down, competitive, intimidating brands to more approachable, collaborative, community-centric brands. And we'll hit on that. But I think in order to give that context, I couldn't really in good conscience pontificate about that without first explaining who I am and where I've come from, because I've only been in the fitness brand industry since March. So if that was the only thing you knew about me, then I really have no right to stand up here in front of you guys and tell my story or talk about the future, because who am I? But what I thought I'd do is I'd take you through the history of Runkeeper, how it got founded, the bumps and twists along the way. And I think you'll find that while some entrepreneurs get up at events like this and give you only the pretty stuff, this kind of airbrush version of reality, I plan to give you kind of a more raw and candid view of my startup journey. Also the acquisition, how it came about, and what the premise was from our standpoint, and a little bit about maybe what ASIC saw, as well as the future. And with the caveat that, I mean, I'm a software entrepreneur, so again, I'm only a few months into my fitness brand journey, so I'll share my thoughts of the future, and as someone who was brought in really to shake up the traditional fitness brand, but not someone who grew up in the fitness brand industry. Does that make sense? Does that sound good? Is that a good use of our time? today. I hope so. I didn't have a lot of context coming in, so I don't want to totally miss the mark. So Runkeeper. My background, I was not an engineer by training. I was a liberal arts undergrad, which I guess, yeah, no offense to liberal arts, but I didn't study a whole lot in undergrad. And I got out and I just kind of fell into the technology industry. So I grew up, I spent several years working in Boston area. I'm from Boston, Boston area technology firms in recruiting roles, in sales roles, selling software into big companies, in partnership roles, again with software into big companies. And I grew up as I was working in these technology companies, thinking someday I'm going to start my own technology company. And so it was all kind of practice before the big game. I was working for these companies, studying what the founders and the executive team were doing and what decisions they were making, thinking at some point I'd go out on my own. And I never really, I cared about the product we made, making customers happy, the people that I worked with, learning, achieving great things, growing organizations. But the widget itself, the products that we made, were never really personally relatable to me. They were things like data storage, optical networking, so kind of the plumbing of the internet, which is very important. It's the backbone of the internet that we all use every day. But it just wasn't something as a non-engineer that was really relatable for me. But I thought that the widget didn't matter, and that the reason I wasn't fully fulfilled in these companies I was working in was that they weren't mine. It wasn't my idea, and so once I founded a company, then that would be enough. And I spent several years thinking through, well, what kind of company should I start? And during that journey, I was looking at idea after idea. I was sitting in coffee shops. I was self-conscious about my ideas. I wouldn't even talk about them with anybody. And I don't know if anyone can relate to that. If you have ideas of your own, maybe, and putting that stake in the ground and talking about them, it actually takes a lot. I mean, it's crazy that several years of this, and I don't think I talked about one idea to one person, my childhood friend, who I've been friends with since I was 5 years old. I used to tell him my crappy ideas, but nobody else. So I was thinking of these ideas, and I just couldn't get there. An idea would hold my interest for a few weeks or a few months, and then I would just kind of move on to the next one. And years after year would go by, and I was getting really frustrated. I was thinking to myself, what's holding me back? I was starting to have self-doubt. Maybe I'm not cut out to be an entrepreneur. So in my gut, I felt like I really was, and I didn't know what was holding me back, but I wasn't about to let it stop me, so I had the brilliant idea that I would quit my job and focus full-time on figuring it out. And then I thought, well, that sounds really stupid, because you have no team, and you have no idea, and you've done nothing towards this non-idea with no one to help you out, so do you really want to stop getting paid? And so I said, well, the least I can do is wait until my once-a-year bonus comes, because then that'll give me another full year of living expenses so that I can focus on, I can have a longer runway to figure out what I want to be when I grow up. And the bonus was paid, I think it was 4 or 5 months away. So I said, well, how am I going to stay sane for the next 4 or 5 months while I'm just rotting, waiting for this bonus? I'm going to train for my first marathon. So I signed up for this marathon, and I wasn't a runner growing up. I grew up, I stayed active. I was into fitness and eating right. I played team sports, ice hockey and lacrosse. And I just kind of discovered running after college. So I did one race a few years after college, and then I did a half marathon. And so this marathon, this was like a big jump for me because I had only done one half. And I said, well, this is a big deal. I'm going to take this training really seriously. This is a perfect way for me to get my mind off of rotting while I'm waiting for this bonus. So I started training for the marathon, and I was using this it was like a chip in the shoe made by some sneaker company. I don't remember which one, but it was with my iPod. There was no iPhone at the time, and so during this training, it was just this kind of culmination of events where I was training for the race. I was working, I was training for the race, and then when I wasn't training for the race, I was sitting in coffee shops trying to figure out what kind of company I would start after I got this bonus. And as I was training for the race, I was using that chip and then some other tools, and I just remember it was this kind of slow process of, as a consumer, like, this is a good start, but there's so much more I'd like to see. Wouldn't it be cool if it was this way? What about that way? Oh, like there's these trends happening in the marketplace. Like that's going to be interesting in a few years and things like that. But just really as a runner. And then I started looking around and saying, well, there must be someone who's taking advantage of this, and I couldn't find anybody. So it was just this kind of slippery slope where at a certain point those worlds collided. And I think the big aha for me, it was like, sure, if you spun out this kind of digital fitness platform into a company that isn't just a marketing side project for a sneaker company, and you focused on it as your only thing, then I mean that feels like a big thing to me, especially given the trends that were happening with mobile and with sensors and things like that. And if you focus it not on the hardcore athletes, but you focus it on everyday people who are trying to get out and stay motivated around fitness, well, that feels pretty good as well. But those weren't actually the big ahas. The big aha was, I figured out what's been holding me back for the last 5 years. I was focused on things that I knew versus things that I was passionate about. And I figured out what I'm passionate about besides building technology companies. It's fitness. It's been such a big part of my life all of these years that it didn't even occur to me that it was a passion. It was just kind of part of the fabric of who I am. So I have this hypothesis for a fitness technology company, but even if it's the wrong hypothesis, I'm going to dedicate the next several years of my life to building a big fitness technology company. And if it's not this one, it's going to be a different one. But now I'm ready to go. So I started working on it immediately, nights and weekends, and then quit my job after the marathon and after my bonus. And it just so happened that I was quitting my job to go build this fitness platform right as the iPhone App Store was starting to launch. So I quit my job in May of 2008, and the App Store launched in July of 2008, and we were there right at launch. And when I say we, I mean it was like I was full-time, and then my team they had day jobs, and they were working nights and weekends on this project with me. But I was the only one full-time, and I don't write any code. So we launched right as the App Store launched. We immediately had people using our product, and it felt really good, and I don't write any code. And the engineers had jobs during the day, so what could I do except do things like, well, I might as well talk to our users. So I started interacting with the consumers. We set up a support forum, and we answered every consumer that reached out, whether it was an issue or if they had a feature request or they just wanted to congratulate us on what we had built. And so we really started building this brand. So you can see, like, this is like the long way of getting to where brands are going. But we started building this brand, not like top down with big advertising campaigns or things like that, because we didn't have an advertising budget. But we started building it kind of in the trenches, engaging with people in two-way dialogue, where if they had a feature request, we would talk to them. If they were really thoughtful about it, we might not just talk to them over email, but we might get on the phone. So someone in the technology industry, Paul Graham, wrote a blog post about doing things that don't scale. I mean, I experienced firsthand the benefits that can come with doing these little things in the early days that don't scale, that can ultimately turn into big things down the road. We continued to just operate off of instinct because we had never done this before. I had never done it. My team had never done it, so we were just kind of feeling our way in the dark. But we were one of the first brands to have a Twitter account that was a brand Twitter account and not a person Twitter account, because we saw that people were talking about us all over Twitter, and we wanted to be part of that discussion. So we did that, and most of the other brands in the fitness category at the time didn't even have Twitter accounts. But then when they did have Twitter accounts, it was this like stuffy corporate one-way communication. They might tweet like, "Call this 800 number to get your answer," instead of just answering the question. We were also one of the first, and I'm less proud of this one, but if you remember, like the Farmville and stuff like that, the shared posts on Facebook. So we were the first in the fitness to integrate with Facebook so that you could share your activities. So all of a sudden, our consumers who were passionate about the brand because we were engaged with them, not just in the support forum, but blogging about the startup journey and the trials and tribulations of that, our vision for the future, things we were confident about, things we weren't confident about. So unlike, I guess, again, to give a little teaser of fitness brands, where fitness brands, it's been this kind of airbrushed, overpackaged, like you only showing your best foot forward, a very carefully crafted image. Well, this was this like ragtag startup band that was just out there like putting it all on the table. Kind of like what I'm trying to do here today. So that really resonated with a certain kind of consumer, and we just kind of started to go from there, where we would just put ourselves out there as we built the business. So in the early days, that went great. We had a vibrant community. We were making money. So we had a paid app, and we also had a subscription service that you could subscribe to for advanced functionality. So it was enough to pay the bills. It wasn't a ton of money, but we didn't need to raise any money. So we raised a little bit of money, and we never touched that. And we raised a little bit more, and we never touched that. And then we just started getting seduced, I guess, by the whole venture capital thing. It just seemed like if you're building a big consumer app or service, that it was almost like a credibility stamp, that you raised the big VC and all of a sudden you've arrived. So I'd kind of sworn off VC in the earliest days, but then it was like a slippery slope. We raised a little bit of money and tastes okay, and then raise a little more, and it's like, all right. And so we started thinking about raising a big round. We didn't even know what to do with the big round. I mean, we started this company from a place of love. We didn't have like a big world-changing vision of how we're going to flip the world upside down. And when you raise VC, building a strong business is not enough. You need to be selling the story of building a company that's gunning to be one of the 4 or 5 most important companies in technology that year, right? And we just didn't have that story. We had a great business I could build for the rest of my life, right? But that's not, VC. It's like 3 to 5 years. It's compressed into this small time horizon, and you've got to just swing for the fences, and the fences fast. And for some reason, consumer startups in the States, or certainly in the technology hubs of the States, that just seems like if you're serious about what you're building, if you have guts, if you have ambition, you have to raise VC. That's just what you do. So when we didn't have that VC story until we kind of started looking for a story that was VC fundable, and so we kind of landed on the story of this health platform. We're going to aggregate the world's health information, not just running, not just fitness, all of health. And it was a big story. I was like, I can sell that. But in hindsight, it really wasn't our story to tell. I think it was a noble vision, and it was an important problem to solve, and it's one that, the big companies like Apple and Google are very much working towards solving today. It's still got a long way to go, many years later. But anyways, we raised this big venture round, this $10 million venture round back in 2011 on this health graph vision. And then almost immediately on the other side of that, even if it wasn't a conscious thing of my heart's not in this big health graph vision, I think subliminally, it was almost like a magnetic force that kept pulling us back to building a strong running-focused consumer brand. So we raised this money on this ecosystem platform, data, this kind of plumbing, back to the plumbing, right? I tried to get away from the plumbing, and that's why I started a consumer brand to begin with. But so now there's these expectations that we're going to go do this thing that's kind of not even consumer facing. It's more developer facing and things like that. But yet all of our execution continued to be on the running community because that's what we loved. The Runkeeper community, that was like our oxygen. So that's not a good combination. And we believe it or not, we spent a few years in that state where we had the round that came in on this big health vision, and we're kind of executing against this running community. And not only did that mean we weren't going towards the big health vision, but it meant we were kind of under executing on the running vision because we didn't really have a North Star for the running vision because, the board of directors was still thinking the North Star would be this health vision. And the company was confused about it too. It's like, well, are we or aren't we, right? And you get different answers depending on who you ask. So in late 2014, we had a big aha, and we said, we're a running company. And that was a big change because although we had kind of been executing as if we were a running company, we hadn't declared it. We hadn't made a choice. We were just hedging. Like, well, we're kind of both. Terrible thing to do. You have to make the hard decision. Put it out there. Take a stand. It's polarizing, but you have to do it. If you hedge, try to make everyone happy, you make no one happy. So we said we're a running company, and because we had this kind of crossroads of either we're going to go for it, which means we have to go raise new VC at this point because we're running out of cash, right? We have to raise new VC on an even bigger vision than the one we raised on 3 years before, or we're a running company. If we're a running company, it means we're hunkering down, we're getting laser focused, we're focusing on our core, we're focusing on business model, we're doing what businesses do. So thankfully, we had a very supportive board of directors who, so the VCs that had already invested in the company 3 years before, they continue to support the business. They didn't need to do that. They could have just let us die. But they were supportive of me, supportive of the team, supportive of the company, and they saw that we had created something of real value. So actually getting back to our core sounded good to them to kind of maximize the value that we already had. So they put new money into the business, and we got running focus. This was heading into 2015. So as 2015 went on, a few things happened. So we said, okay, well, for running focus, which we should have been all along, my bad. But if we're running focus, how are we different than the other apps that are out there? Because there's a lot of apps now, right? And it's not too different a challenge than the big fitness brands think about when they think, well, how are we different? If we're a fitness footwear company, how are we different than the other running shoes, for example? And in the early days when we were building this health thing and we also had this running thing, we didn't have a great answer for that. But since running was our only thing, we really had to kind of look inside our core. Who are we? What do we stand for? And we started to see that although we had never been explicit about our brand, we subliminally were explicit about our brand. We just hadn't put it on paper and articulated it. If you looked at other fitness brands, they start at the top of the pyramid. They showcase elite athletic performance, this unobtainable standard of fitness. They're intimidating. They're not approachable. They make you feel like if you're not shredded and an Olympic athlete that you don't belong. Runkeeper is nothing like that. We didn't go out and we didn't have the budget to sponsor pro athletes, but even if we did, it would have felt off brand. We wouldn't have done it. We celebrated inspirational stories from within the user community. People that are just like you, that are going and achieving the things that you aim to achieve, but they're a little further on their journey than you. Those are the stories that seem to resonate best with our community. We weren't about building this unobtainable standard of fitness, but we were about building a fitness brand that made it okay to be a beginner. Wherever you are on your journey, you could feel comfortable getting in, and it's less about competition and cutthroat and more about collaboration, helping people along, encouragement, building a movement where we're all in this together. So right or wrong, that's what felt good to us. So we had never articulated it, we never put it on paper, but we were acting it every day. So we started to put it on paper, and it felt really good. We also started focusing on making money, And as we ramped our business model, we gained confidence that there are ways that we were allergic to making money in the early days because we didn't want to pollute the purity of the consumer experience. But what we found was there's actually ways to make money that make the consumer experience better. For example, charging for advanced functionality that our power users choose to pay for, either because they want those features or just because the brand really changed their life and they want to support the brand. We were allergic to advertising because we didn't want to beat people over the head to buy stuff or pollute their experience with banner ads and things like that. But we uncovered we could do things like host challenges that brands could sponsor where the consumers can unlock discounts or unique experiences or early access or things that actually might be really motivating to people. And that would feel good, and we'd be selective about which products we work with so that we're only working with products that we believe in. So things like that. So we had this brand that was starting to come together, and we had this business model that was starting to work. But the problem was that in the early days, when we raised this big pile of VC, we weren't focused on making money at all, and we hired a ton. And we got this big workforce. Well, big for us, it was like 50-something people. We're actually a little bigger now, but at the time, it was this kind of unwieldy workforce. We had a very high burn rate. So although our business model was starting to ramp, it wasn't in line with our expenses. Our expenses were too high. And other than that, we had gotten kind of fat as a company, where even as a 50-something person company, it's not that we didn't have great people. We had very high quality people at that time, but they were too spread out. It was too much process. We had kind of gotten slow and not as innovative as we should have been at this stage. And so we did a layoff in the summer of 2015. We cut 30% of the team. That team was like a family in the years before, and I think that was, I know it was a really excruciating thing to go through as an entrepreneur. It was also very hard for the team because we had this kind of idyllic culture where we were all family, and now there's this big chunk of the team, and these were great people as well that weren't with us any longer. As painful as it was very, very clear that that was the right thing to do for the business, because then we could grow back from a position. We went from burning hundreds of thousands of dollars every month to essentially running profitably. And we kind of stripped down the organizational structure to be much more limber, where we could move quicker and get more things done, even with less people. So we did that in the summer of 2015, and then also, as we were executing, we started to unpack a big vision that we really did believe in. And what we saw was that it was like, wait a minute, we thought the old way, where you need to get hundreds of millions of people and then flip an advertising switch someday, because that's the way a lot of these consumer apps work. In order to do that, we thought we had to go beyond running because there's not enough runners. But if you actually look at running and fitness, it's a huge market. There might not be as many people as, say, like a horizontal service like a Twitter or a Facebook. But if you look at the spend that flows through the category, these are huge numbers. Most of it's on physical products. And then we looked at the physical product companies and we said, because we were working with these big brand partners, and we said, well, these big brand partners, the ones that are making all the money, they have no direct relationship with the end consumer. And retail's contracting, and they have no direct relationship with the end consumer. They need to find alternative means of distribution. And not only that, like they don't even really, some of them don't even really understand who their consumers are, because they're used to this wholesale model where they're spending all their time with retail partners and not with you and I. And then we saw what they were trying to get to. They were trying to get embedded in the consumer's lives, go from less of a transaction and more to an ongoing service where they're adding value and being top of mind on an ongoing basis. And we said, wait a minute, we're the opposite. We're embedded in the consumer's daily lives, where we have ample touch points on an ongoing basis to build loyalty, trust, value, help them with motivation, help them through their fitness journey. But those guys are making all the money. So shouldn't these two worlds collide? right? We started seeing that maybe there was an opportunity for a new kind of fitness brand to be built that has kind of the market might and supply chain and product manufacturing capabilities and marketing budgets and athlete portfolio and race sponsorships and all the things that these big brands bring to the table, but also is embedded in the consumer's lives on an ongoing basis, more like a service. And that felt pretty exciting, so we said, well, that's what we need to create. And we said, well, how are we going to do that? So it was kind of like phases, where the first phase was focusing on just building the Runkeeper user base, getting it bigger, building more brand equity and trust, having more touch points on an ongoing basis with the consumers so that we're providing more value across more aspects of their fitness journey. And then the next step was starting to connect the consumers with products that they love at times when they need those products in a way that actually makes the consumer, it's like, oh, that service did me a favor because I needed that product anyways. How did Runkeeper know that? So the plan was to keep building the Runkeeper user base, and we were starting to work with a bunch of these big fitness brands, pretty much everyone that didn't have their own digital platform already, and starting to unlock how we could introduce those brands to the Runkeeper community in intelligent ways that the consumers were psyched about, but that the brands were psyched about as well. And the master plan was not to build this independent platform and work across all these different brands, but ultimately to become one of these brands. And we had the burn. I mean, we were essentially running profitably, so we had all the time in the world. The piece we hadn't connected yet, though, was how are we going to get into the shoe and apparel business? We don't know anything about shoes and apparel. So that was just kind of this mystery box. We were like, well, we'll figure that out later. And that's when we started talking to ASICS. It was really interesting timing for them, because I think they've had such success as a company. I mean, they're this 5,000 person global powerhouse brand, but some of the things that I talked about, they've been primarily wholesale and product focused, looking to get more consumer focused at the center, and also very dominant with the performance, kind of the top of the pyramid. Some ridiculous percentage of marathoners wear ASICS shoes. But looking to then take that strength at the top of the pyramid and extend that into the more lifestyle segment. And one of the misconceptions about Runkeeper is that we're for hardcore runners. We have hardcore runners that use our service, but a third of the activities on Runkeeper are walks. The average pace for runs is slower than 11-minute miles. And I should know what that converts to in kilometers, but I don't know it offhand. In the early days, it was 80-20 male-female, but more than 50% of our new users are female as well. So we've just seen that. I mean, we've just been this. It's not that we can't service the hardcore, but that's not our sweet spot. Our sweet spot is people who, even if they run all the time, wouldn't really be comfortable saying, I'm a runner. It's like, well, I run 3 times a week, but I'm not a runner. I'm into fitness, I'm into living a healthy life, I'm trying to lose weight, or I'm trying to stay around for my kids and stay healthy, that kind of thing. So it's just a really nice fit from a, kind of extending the dominance of ASICS performance into that lifestyle. And it was also a nice fit in that if you look at the other fitness brands out there, they do many things, and ASICS does many things as well, but running's really their crown jewel. That's very much true with Runkeeper. You can use Runkeeper for a bunch of different activities, but more than 60% of the activities are running. And when you think about, well, the name, Runkeeper, it's very running focused. So we had this long courtship, and as we're talking to them, the more time we spent with them, and it involved trips to Japan, and it involved them coming from Japan to Boston, since ASICS, although they're multinational and everywhere, their headquarters is in Kobe, Japan. But the more time we spent with them, the more clear it was that we saw the same thing about where the world was going. And out of all the fitness brands out there, although we hadn't worked with them from a commercial standpoint, it was like, man, they're actually the best fit, better than anybody else. And our assets, almost without exception, are different than theirs, and vice versa. And our assets can really help them, and their assets can really help us. We have software expertise and data expertise, analytics expertise, mobile expertise. We have successful consumer digital product, we have a big, huge user community that's global. We know a lot about that community in the aggregate that can help personalize the experience for each consumer. They have product making expertise, health science expertise, PhDs who do research, athletes that they sponsor, races that they sponsor, big marketing budgets, shoe boxes, retail stores, all these things that we could only dream about. So we decided that we would take the leap and we'd work together to build a new kind of fitness brand that combines the best of both of our assets to fulfill this vision together. And it was a good place to be because we didn't decide it was time to sell the company. We didn't like put it on the block and go out and cast a wide net. We were mostly just heads down executing on this vision that we're finally in a position where our execution matched our long vision and vice versa. It wasn't this health platform and then running community. It was this running community extending to commercial partnerships with big product makers to ultimately build products ourselves. That was the vision. And because we were essentially running profitably, we weren't on anybody's clock. So if we were going to do something with a strategic partner like ASICS, it would need to make sense for both sides. And I feel very fortunate that we got to a place where it did make sense, where it's not the end of a journey, or some people call it, it's an exit. You get out, but actually, we're just getting in, right? I mean, it's the beginning of this new beginning of creating this fitness brand that's a consumer and digital and mobile and data company at the core, so that it can guide consumers through their journey with the brand and their journey with sport. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.